You may have heard of Atlantis. I've been reading a lot. I'll show you the books. Did I show you? Eight books, digital and paper, massive processing. I used to think, probably like you think, human beings from the caves wandered off, became hunter-gatherers, maybe made little villages, temporary. Eventually evolved so that they could grow things themselves. Agriculture grew. Staying in one place became an idea. Villages became inner cities. None of that rings anywhere near true anymore. I do accept that there was at least two civilizations far more advanced than even we are now, but were wiped out by a sudden and catastrophic flood during the Ice Age, which is another thing I've learnt about. The Ice Age did not have the Earth covered in ice, just the northern hemisphere, down to about Britain, including Britain. In those days when Britain was part of Europe, as it bloody well should be. Anyway, the comet hit the ice. The ice suddenly flooded over a day and a night. Those are ancient civilizations, pre-history civilizations. Atlantis and Lemoria. Atlantis in the Atlantic, Lemoria, more spiritual apparently. They were in the Pacific region. Again, it was land. The Atlantic was land. But they knew it was coming. They knew the age was coming, the end was coming. They could see, not just see far into the stars, they could exist far into the stars, understand its energies and their influences and their power. They could be there. If there's one thing that you could assuage any doubt you may have, just look at the pyramids in Egypt. How were they done? 200-ton blocks, perfectly fitting. But the Atlanteans, when they did realise the end was coming, began to make their mark on the rest of Earth. Mounds in North America, the Aztec Pyramids, South America. Once the flood did come, according to one book, there's two good books, Atlantis and the Coming of Age and Magicians of the Gods. But Atlantis Coming of Age does explain how survivors of the Atlantis catastrophe walked across North Africa when the Sahara was arable and not a desert, to Egypt, became the Pharaohs. That was the key link for me. They were the first Pharaohs. I was never happy with the Egyptians or the locals at that time building the pyramids, you know, all slaves and ropes and pulleys. Nah, that was never for me. The survivors from Atlantis over North Africa to Egypt building the pyramids. Why? To make their mark, possibly. No bodies were ever found in that main Giza pyramid. Maybe they did serve as a vehicle for them to ascend into the stars, or they were the stars on Earth, as was found out in the 1990s. The 3 pyramids line up exactly with 3 stars. Not just closely, but exactly. So they had technology which we've not been able to match, leaving the mark, and also a warning that it'll happen again, the catastrophe, and it is happening, I believe now. What, 10, 11, 12,000 years after the flood, we are approaching another ice age. I know it feels warmer, but that's that can be a build up to drastic change. We don't think of the earth, do we? We think of ourselves. And that was another point made by Plato in his coverage of the Atlantis period, that it was decadence and indulgence that brought them to an end. I think it's the other way around. I think they knew their civilization was coming to an end, and it did split up into 2 groups of people. One who became even more spiritual and more thankful, and the other group who just wanted to indulge their talents for their own ends. 2 groups fighting amongst themselves. This is covered by Plato. But I tend to think that after 100,000, maybe 200,000 years, the only civilization that lasted any kind of time, the Romans only managed, what, 600-700 years, Greeks 3 or 4, what are we into now, since the industrial age, what, about 200-300 the most years. I'm rating them, we're making a right dog's arse of it, aren't we really? We're taking. There's no appreciation at all of how life exists. None at all as to why it should exist. The religions, it's said that the Atlantis people brought religion to the primitive peoples. But what's not said in the books is in bringing that spiritualisation to humans in primitive times, they brought everything except the evidence. They could not bring the evidence because primitive humans, as humans now, do not possess the necessary talent to be able to see amongst the stars, to be amongst the stars, to feel their power, to feel their influence, to know of their energies. Even now I'm using scientific words that may or may not be anywhere near the reality of being in amongst the stars. So the Atlanteans brought the idea of spiritualism and religion without the evidence. So of course our much smaller brains, our much smaller minds, simplified things, give it a word. I'm not going to say. And of course the factions grew into different religions, which do everything apart from live with each other in peace. I don't deny the usefulness as a form of order amongst those who are not able to appreciate that they're not alone. Not everybody's alone. That we do coexist. I can see how a kind of spiritual getting together, often amongst stone erections that point to the sun and the moon, as well as helping the agriculture, being able to see when an equinox is due, provide that communal feeling and that spiritual connectivity between people. Again, without the evidence, aside from the weather, of any higher power or inner power that the Atlanteans and the Lemurians clearly possessed. They lived in a peak growth area. The best illustration is actually in the film Avatar, where they go to Pandora. I wondered if Pandora is a representation of Atlantis peak growth. Everything big, humans big, brains big, minds even bigger. So the religion, what do we do now at the end of this? We are the next, some say the an Aquarius 2040 is a new age. I'd have to understand much more about stars than the Daily Mail horoscope, so I don't know. But certainly events, even in the last few days, New York being flooded. It's not Hollywood, this isn't Hollywood, this is real life. Germany and Europe has been flooded many times the last couple of years. That's just the weather. The climate is undoubtedly changing. Some say we need shaking down. The earth is shaking us down. COVID. Coincidence? Nah. I don't believe in coincidence. You've got to listen to the planet. You've got to listen to